Hello, this video is about the ratification debate. So once the Constitution has been unveiled and it has been shown to the nation, there still is a need to ratify it, meaning to approve it. And so now it's going to go out to the states, and there is going to be a big, huge debate that is going to follow. And there's going to be two different groups that line up with this, and we have the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. And so a lot of what happened was that each side was starting to write letters and articles and different things to try to convince people in their states, well, in just the different states, in order to support their view. So on the Federalist side, we have Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, and they're going to write a series of 85 essays explaining and supporting ratification. Hamilton will write the majority of those. And it's interesting to note that even though Madison is a Federalist, he's considered the father of the Constitution, he will soon after this begin to follow more along the side of the other, that it's too strong of a government. And he will align later on with Thomas Jefferson, and we'll talk about that in another video, about he will become a Democratic Republican in opposition to Hamilton. These are first published in leading newspapers and later in book form, and I have a few of them that we're going to look at. Similar to the writers of the Federalist Papers, we have others that are writing urging rejection of the Constitution, including the letters from a federal farmer, the observations on the new Constitution, and the objections to this constitution of government. And I have one to show you in a minute. So to understand where the Federalists and Anti-Federalists' main ideas were, the Federalists are the supporters of the Constitution. And it's really important that you don't confuse them with the later political party, also known by the same name as the Federalists. These two groups are not political parties. They are simply groups that align for one purpose, and that is to either support or oppose the ratification of the Constitution. So the Federalists believe that the Constitution is good and it should be approved because there was a need for a stronger national government. And this was what was created through the Constitution. They also believe that men of experience and talent should govern, not just regular common people, but those that actually took the time to become educated on the subject. They did not believe there was a need for the Bill of Rights because, as they said, it was protected through the Constitution as well as state government. And in fact, they were concerned that if they wrote down certain rights that people had, that government would someday say, well, that's all you get. You don't get any more rights besides what those are listed. On the other side, the Anti-Federalists liked the Articles of Confederation. They were usually strong proponents of the states having the power and opposed a strong central government because they likened it to a tyranny. They felt that it would threaten their liberties of people and individual rights. And also they felt that state rights are threatened because the states would not have as much power under the Constitution as they did under the Articles of Confederation. And then really one of the sticking points for them is there's no Bill of Rights. They felt that if it was not written down, the government would try to take it away. So they wanted that. So here's one of the first ones, Federalist number 10, and it deals with factions or divisions of groups of people. Among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserves to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. By a faction, I understand a number of citizens, whether a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united by some common impulse of passion or of interest, adverse to the rights of other citizens or to the permanent interests of the community. He is defining factions here as any group of people who is split away from the majority and they are actively working against the rights of citizens or the rights of the community and the good of the community. Later on, factions will be morphed into a different definition, which is just a division of people into political parties. But at this point, it's really looking at it as a kind of rogue group of citizens who are trying to destroy what has been created. Then he goes on to say the causes of faction cannot be removed. It's not possible. Therefore, the relief is only to be sought in the means of controlling its effects, to refine and enlarge the public views, by passing them through a medium of a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interests of their country, and whose patriotism and love of justice will be least likely to sacrifice it to temporary or partial considerations. So he looked at both the concept of a democracy, where individuals all have the right to vote and everybody's making decisions. And he realizes that this is not going to be possible because states are too large and the country is going to grow too large, that you can't possibly have everybody governing. So he talks about a republic, which is the idea where we choose representatives to then go and do the governing for us, which is what we have. And Here he's talking about that we pass them through the chosen body, that we help to decide who is going to represent us. And he also feels that these individuals are the ones who will best be able to think about what is in the best interest of their country, and whose patriotism and love of justice is least likely to be swayed by temporary issues. Well, I wonder what he would think about of politics as it ended up turning out. Factions certainly created political parties, and even as far back as we look at Jefferson and Hamilton with the creation of political parties in another video, it seems like we definitely have a struggle with that bottom one of the idea of these individuals that are being elected on both sides to sacrifice their temporary interests for the greater good. And that is something that through periods of time in American history, such as when we look at the Civil War, that we're going to see very highlighted is that those individuals from Southern states just cannot put aside this for the greater good of the whole country, because to them, slavery and states' rights and all that is the greater good of the country as opposed to what the people in the North see. So this is going to be a really tough thing for, and why part of it, our preamble to the Constitution is going to state in order to create a more perfect union, because never a perfect union, because we know that's not possible, but always striving to be better. And we have times throughout American history that will test us, and Madison was able to see this, and that's why he advocated for the system of government that was created, the strong constitution that hopefully would prohibit just the average people from dissolving it. Next, we have the idea of separation of powers is spelled out here in Federalist number 51. In the compound Republic of America, the power surrendered by the people is first divided between two distinct governments. And so here he's referring to state governments and the national government. And then the portion allotted to each subdivided among distinct and separate departments. So at the national level, we end up having separation of powers between the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. And even at the state levels, we also have different branches that usually fall along those lines. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of people. So he sees by having this division between states and federal government, which is known as federalism, and also then further dividing it between the three branches of government and separation of powers, will protect the rights of the people, because we'll have this extra layer of security. The different governments will control each other, and at the same time, each will be controlled by itself. So here he's outlining another fundamental of the Constitution, which is checks and balances, and the idea that each government is supposed to ensure that the other doesn't become too strong. And then finally, we have the Federalist number 84, which is the Bill of Rights. I go further and affirm that Bill of Rights in the sense and to the extent in which they are contended for are not only unnecessary in the proposed constitution, but would even be dangerous. They would contain various exceptions to powers not granted, and on this very account could afford a colorable pretext to claim more than were granted. For why declare things shall not be done, which there is no power to do? Why, for instance, should it be said that the liberty of the press shall not be restrained when no power is given by which restrictions can be imposed? So here he's referring to what will become the eventual First Amendment, with the idea that why should we spell out that there's freedom of the press? Because there's no restrictions that we've given that Congress isn't allowed to control the press. So he sees the Bill of Rights, they see the Bill of Rights as not important, and in fact could be dangerous, because now we're planting new ideas in the government's head. On the flip side, we have George Mason, who is an anti-federalist, objecting to the Constitution, saying there is no Declaration of Rights, and the laws of the general government being paramount to the laws and constitutions of the several states, the declarations of rights in the separate states are no security, nor are the people secured even in the enjoyment of the benefits of the common law. This government will set out a moderate aristocracy. It is at present impossible to foresee whether it will, in its operation, produce a monarchy or a corrupt tyrannical aristocracy. It will most probably vibrate some years between the two and then terminate in one or the other. So the first part, he's talking about the need for the Bill of Rights and how the Constitution, as well as the laws of states, is not enough to protect the security, that it needs to be spelled out. And in the second part, he spells out one of the major concerns of the anti-federalists, which is the fact that this national government is too strong, and it could lead to either a monarchy, which we just got rid of. We don't need another king, or it could be a aristocracy, which is a rule by the wealthy. And when we talk about tyranny, we're talking about absolute control. And so they're really fearful of creating another situation in which the leadership, the government of the country, is able to control the people and create a tyranny. So here's a map that shows you kind of some where the Federalist majorities and anti-Federalist majorities are, and how some states like Pennsylvania actually have kind of a mixture of it. So those are the areas in which it became a very tough to decide which direction are they going to ratify or are they not going to ratify. And there's a couple states to mention, and Virginia is one of those that is crucial to the legitimacy of the new government. It is the largest state, and they felt that there is no way that they could possibly have this government without without ensuring Virginia was on board with the Constitution. And both Patrick Henry and George Mason led the Anti-Federalists, whereas we said Washington and Madison had led the Federalists in Virginia, particularly. So these are all individuals in Virginia. The Federalists did finally win after proposing 20 amendments that the legislature would consider after ratification. And if you look at this political cartoon here, it says the ninth pillar erected. The ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this constitution between the states for the ratifying fame. And if you look, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, South Carolina, and New Hampshire was enough. It was already created as here is our Constitution, it's passed. However, if we don't have Virginia, then how can we really expect this to continue to function if we don't have the largest state? And New York is another one that is too large. We cannot just ignore it. But in this case, the anti-federalists within the state are saying we can't give our authority to the central government. We should control ourselves. We're large. Who cares about the small states by comparison? But we are too large to hand over our power. Hamilton, however, who is from New York, has a lot of influence, and his Federalist Papers helped to sway some anti-federalists. And Virginia's ratification tipped the balance to New York. When Virginia agreed to the Constitution, so did New York. And then North Carolina and Rhode Island are going to ratify it later. And in fact, in Rhode Island, there's almost a civil war because of it, because there is a lot of disagreement over this. And so, really quickly to go over the Bill of Rights, because that was one of the most crucial. That's the reason they were able to get the Constitution passed, was to agree to add the Bill of Rights later. And just as a reminder, what the Bill of Rights is, in the First Amendment, we have religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. In the second is the right to bear arms. The third is no quartering of troops during peacetime. The fourth is no unlawful search and seizure. The fifth is the rights of accused persons, as well as the sixth, which includes the right to an attorney and trial by jury. The seventh is that there are no any civil lawsuit worth more than $20 gets a jury trial. So a civil suit means there's no crime. And the eighth one is no cruel and unusual punishment or excessive bail. The Ninth Amendment is citizens have more rights than are listed here. And the 10th Amendment reserved the rights of the states. So just to go back to the ninth here, because they were concerned about the government saying we only have what's listed in these 10 amendments, they added the ninth for the idea that just because it's not listed here doesn't mean it's not our right. For example, there's nowhere in the Constitution does it say we have the right or don't have the right to travel freely across the country. But we do because of the Ninth Amendment, because that's our right, even though it's not listed here, because Congress doesn't say that we can't do it. And then number 10 says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved for the states respectively or the people. This is a really important amendment that you definitely need to know, because it will be brought up time and time again when states say, wait a minute, you don't have that right, national government, therefore you can't do it. It's our right. And we'll see that with a tariff crisis that's going to happen, particularly with South Carolina in the 1800s. We will see that with the Civil War. We still see this today with many issues. And it's become a very controversial, not the amendment itself, but this idea of if it's not listed in the Constitution and it's not prohibited to the states, then can the states take up that? And can states nullify a law they disagree with? And there's a lot of different things we're going to come back to with the 10th Amendment. And that is it. Thank you.